Welcome to Untangled, a podcast sponsored by the Iota Foundation, exploring the real-world applications of the Tangle, a unique distributed ledger technology researched and developed by the Iota Foundation. In today's episode, we will be talking about electric vehicles. While climate change continues to be a matter of global concern, only baby steps are taken politically, despite the urgent encouragements for action from the UN and a plethora of scientists. Our many fossil fuel vehicles being a major contributor to that, going electric based on renewable energy seems to be one of the low-hanging fruits in order to meet the demands currently being required by the planet we all live on. But although electric-powered trains have been common for many years, electric cars are observed far less frequently, unless you happen to be in California or in Norway, where Teslas are cruising the roads of both cities and coasts in ever-increasing numbers. But worldwide, it is estimated that the global fleet of electric vehicles amounts to just little over 3 million, while the total number of cars already passed the 1.2 billion mark. Given the current political stalemate, it seems like technological development is needed to really get the wheels turning, and here the Tangle and distributed ledger technologies seem like they will really make an impact. So I went out to ask a few experts about how smart technology can make it a smart enough decision to choose electric vehicles.
What I think that needs to happen to make sure that everybody drives electric in the future is that we have enough range on the car, so you can drive more than 400 kilometers, for example, at least in the Netherlands. We need to have multiple charging stations, enough charging stations right now, but once there will be more electric vehicles, we will need more charging stations. And I think it's also to the government to make sure that from a tax perspective, it's cheaper to drive electric than to drive an ICE car.
ICE car means a car with an internal combustion engine, what most people still just think of as a normal car.
So I think that will be the main drivers for making sure that electric mobility will be the future. My name is Han van der Brink. I have a background in IT. I've got a master's in information science, mainly focused on IT, architect kind of things and cybersecurity. Currently I'm working for Iota and Enexis, which is a Dutch grid operator.
Han van den Brink is also energy and e-mobility advisor for the Iota Foundation, and within this realm, famous for building the Iota charging station, which is completely aligned with the Tangle and allows charging and payment in a fully automated way where no human interaction is needed. Most of the time, though, Harm is dedicated to his job of improving the Dutch and European energy grid networks for Enexis and ELAD.
So ELAD is a foundation on e-mobility. We started back in 2009, mainly focused on placing charge stations. Back then we had the kind of chicken-egg problem. If there are no electric cars, there is no need for charge stations. And if there are no charge stations, then probably nobody will drive electric. So what we did is we placed charge stations. So we started rolling out charge stations over 3,000 until 2012. And we did it because of a grid perspective. So we are founded by grid operators, and they wanted to assess the impact of electric vehicles on the grid. So what does driving electric mean and the energy usage for our current electric grid? But in 2012, the government said it shouldn't be a public task to place charge stations, but should be a commercial task. So we stopped placing charge stations. But since we already had 3,000 charge stations, we now could assess the impact on the grid. So that's what we started doing, gather information, gather data out of the charge stations, and to see what the impact is on the electric grid. And actually that's also the time that we start more innovating on the IT side. So on smart charging, that's controlling the energy flow from the charger to the car. And that's basically the point where ELAD switched into a different position from placing charge stations to more an innovation and knowledge center and innovation center on electric mobility.
ELAD were among the first movers when it came to building charging stations, which turned out to be quite fruitful, as ELAD is now the go-to standard in their business.
Actually, we had to build them ourselves. There were no charge stations you can just buy off the shelf. We had to come up with the ideas ourselves, so we started with different plugs, different devices, different software, everything. But over time, it matured actually. So we are using the same kind of charging plug. We have now OCPP, the Open Charge Point Protocol, which is the standard open source protocol between charger and back office. So everything just grew from there. And I think Elad NL is the main driver in that, even across Europe, because the OCPP was invented by Elad and is used by everyone across the globe. I joined back in 2015, and I started focusing on IT right away. So connecting different systems together, making sure that smart charging actually works. So a grid operator can tell the capacity limits, for example, on a grid to a charge point operator, and they can actually send that information around. And I'm also focused on cybersecurity, because I think cybersecurity is very important in the grid. Once you have more electric vehicles and once you have more smart charging, so controlling the energy flow, you can actually control a lot of energy, combined energy, collective energy on the grid. So I think that should be very secure. So that's my focus also right now, to make sure that the EV infrastructure is secure, not only in the Netherlands, but in Europe.
So, how does distributed ledger technology fit into all of this?
The motivation to look into DLTs is that it allows to do sessions fully autonomously. You have everything is stored safely and securely and immutable. And once you have more electric cars and more charging sessions, you have to do all the administration, at least in the back end. And if that can happen fully autonomously and everything is stored automatically, I think that can really help this ecosystem. Not particularly only for charging sessions, but once that grows into more smarter solutions, like also energy management, so grid management, energy trading, for example, or only charging when the price is as cheap as possible. If you add more things to that, you probably will need a better solution than we have right now. So distributed ledgers could be one of these solutions.
Distributed ledger technology is a wide term that also encompasses blockchain, which Bitcoin and Ethereum, the two most famous cryptocurrencies, are based on. But blockchain has some inherent limits like scalability, miners, and transaction fees.
In a world in which a blockchain might be able to process 7 or 20 or 50 transactions per second, and you consider that there may be 100 billion devices that are all communicating data and need to write that data, traditional blockchains are simply incapable, as configured today, to scale to the level that we need in order to capture the huge amounts of data that not just automobiles, but every device is going to be sending and monetizing in the coming economy of things. My name is Terry Shane. I am the founder of the Biotosphere, but also the CEO of Refined Data Solutions.
In his role at the Biotosphere, a non-profit organization based in Toronto using Iota technology for sustainable solutions, Terry recently held a presentation where he, to use his own words, put the proof back in proof of concept by showing viewers how Iota technology can be implemented to invent a completely new way of thinking car insurance. If you haven't already watched that, there's a link in the description which I would highly recommend for anyone to check out. But what does Terry know about emerging technologies?
Interestingly, I have always been fascinated with technology, was involved in the early days of the internet, have some of the early internet patents, and was actually ranked by Yahoo as the 9th most useful site on the internet back in the days when in order to get a list of where to go on the internet, you had to subscribe to a physical magazine that Yahoo published because there were no lists of places to go. So always try and get into technology early in the game. And I feel a bit the same way about Iota after having discovered it as I did when somebody first introduced me to this weird, wonderful thing called the internet.
So what grasped your attention about Iota then?
That the real power and the real future was this exponential growth in devices and not people. That everything that we'd seen up till this time had been around the communications from one human being to another or from a human being to a device. And suddenly this realization that there was going to be this massive explosion in devices that I was already seeing around me, and that they needed to become their own economic agents with micropayments.
Well, that doesn't sound too bad, but surely there must be challenges.
One of the things that I think has been sadly lacking are real world applications that you can point to that people go, aha, I get it. Now I understand.
This leads us back to the presentation about car insurance that I mentioned earlier. I'll still recommend you to watch the video, but what Terry basically did was to use his technical knowledge to extract the data collected from his Tesla, which is published in the Iota ledger and is accessible via a Tangle Explorer. I'll provide a link in the description. This data is then integrated into an insurance program.
Every one of us drives a car, and almost every one of us resents how much we pay for car insurance. And I think that automotive is one of those key areas where the car is a massive computing power on wheels. It's a mobile computer, it's a mobile battery. It's going to require all kinds of innovation in that space. And so we had the opportunity to say, how can we turn an existing business model on its head? And the car is something that everybody can relate to. There will be more and more intelligence in cars. There will be fewer cars on the road because you won't see the purpose in owning one. Because at the point that gridlock kicks in, even today, if I'm going downtown, I need a really good reason to drive downtown because the aggravation of working my way through traffic is just horrible. And then when I get to the other end, I spend almost as much time driving around looking for a parking meter, which costs an outrageous amount of money. It's so much easier to take, a ride-hailed car or to take the subway and then take a ride-hailing vehicle. The whole point was to say, what if in a world of manually driven cars, fully autonomous cars, and all the shades of gray in between, where you have semi-autonomous cars and cars that are enhanced, where the risk of the individual driver is becoming less and less. What if insurance was sold to the car and bought by the car instead of the driver of the car or the owner of the car having anything to do with that model? Obviously, in a current model, I buy the car and I'm the one that is responsible for buying the insurance. But in a world where I buy the car and I drive it some of the time, but it's out delivering packages or it's being used by others who generate revenue for me because I'm sharing the vehicle, what is the point of having the insurance purchased based on the driving record of the person who owns the car, who may actually drive it only a small percentage of the time? So we turned the model upside down and said, how can we have the car buy its own insurance? From there, we expanded and said, what if the insurance companies were competing for the car's business? And so at that point, you have multiple offers being driven to the car and the car having the ability to select between them based on the way the car was being driven. Some of us drive like angels, some of us drive like devils, and some of us drive in both of those capacities at different times, depending on whether we're late, somebody has just had an argument with us, we need to be somewhere in a particular hurry, or we're just trying to impress somebody with the acceleration of our new vehicle. During those times, the car probably represents a greater risk. Also, if you're driving the car, when safety features are on, you probably represent a much lower risk, but it's less to do with you and more to do with the capabilities of the car.
So that's one way of using the Tangle, but what has Harm and Elad been getting out of it?
1.5 years ago, we heard about Iota, so we started looking into Iota, and I saw the potential. Okay, it's cheap because there are no fees. It can be deployed on small devices, and it can also store data. So you don't have to own Iota, or you don't have to do anything with the cryptocurrency to be able to use it. So that's when we started to look into it. First thing we did was just to store randomly some data into the Tangle to see how that worked. And then from there on, we started building up the proof of concept more and more. So we first did a very basic proof of concept with some remote connection and some Iota. And from there on, we just start building it up like a real, more mature use case. And because Iota allows to do free transactions, you can store, for example, measurement data of the smart meter into the Tangle. So that's what we did. and from there on allow payments by a user, then allow payments by a machine for real machine-to-machine communication. So that's how we end up with the charge station we have right now. It allows for autonomously payments by a car. It needs some additional equipment right now, but it's in line with where probably the future will go in the EV infrastructure. This allows for real machine-to-machine communication. No user interaction. The user probably won't even notice that Iota is being used, but because of the use of Iota, it allows to do very secure and very easy transactions to charge the car.
Looking at the bigger picture though, Harm and Terry both agree that electric vehicles are really just one use case of one of the biggest sectors where distributed ledger technology can make an impact.
The charger is just one entity in the full grid. So the charger was one first step into DLTs, but we already envisioned that as a much bigger picture. And what we are doing right now is that we upload the data from the transformer every minute to the Tangle, and every device connected to that transformer can listen to that data. So what, for example, the charge station can do is it can see if the capacity of the transformer is still enough, and if it reaches any limit, it can lower their energy consumption. And the way we want to do that is we want to ask devices to lower their energy usage if they want to. They're not forced. But if they do, they will get a small fee in return. So that's how we want to autonomously have a decentralized grid balancing mechanism. Because in the Netherlands, for example, we have to move away from the gas for heating, so we move to, for example, electricity. And the way the grid was designed 70 or 60 years ago is not the way we envisioned it to be used today. So we have to come up with smart solutions. That's, I think, what a smart grid means, to be able to deal with the new energy demand, new energy peaks, especially on electricity, and how to deal with that. So that's why we look into new technologies, like, for example, DLTs, to be able to support the grid and to be able to manage that grid load and to balance that load over time. Because there is enough capacity on the grid, but not for peak demand. Because everybody comes home, for example, at 6 o'clock, they plug in their charging cable, they start their heat pumps, they start cooking on electricity. So that all adds up. But if we can make sure that the car only charges, for example, during the night, when there's enough of wind energy, we can make sure that we use the grid to the best of their capacity and not overload it during those peak times. So that's why Nexus is looking into these kind of solutions. The way the grid is designed right now is everything in Europe is connected. There is a huge cable between Norway and the Netherlands called Nordnet. And what happens that during the night, usually the energy is transferred to Norway to fill the water reservoirs again. And during the day, they just use that hydro energy again, for example, in the Netherlands. What you could do is, if there is not enough wind energy, you could just import sustainable energy from other countries. But we have to come up with ideas to store energy and store bigger amount of energies. One thing is for sure, there will be more sustainable energy in the grid, and we will need new technologies to control the demand, actually, of energy.
The lower hanging fruit, and the one that I'm personally involved with and interested in, I think there is huge potential in the areas of renewable energy, solar, wind power, water power. I am horrified every day when I see the impacts on our planet of the way that we generate energy, when, if you think about it, all energy that we use today in the form of oil and gas and coal is really just nature's big battery of energy that's been captured and stored in a biological battery from millions of years ago. And essentially, we're borrowing from the past to generate our energy, and our line of credit is rapidly running out. But every day the sun rises and the wind blows and the rains fall, and there is huge amounts of energy that remains untapped that can actually be generated at the point of need. We don't have to dig energy out of the ground, ship it thousands of miles away, risking all kinds of things and expending further energy to get it to a refinery, and then refine it into a product where we ship it all the way back thousands of miles to cars at the risk of all kinds of environmental pollution along the way. And then we burn it at really low levels of efficiency and contaminate the air and pollute the environment, when every hour enough sunlight falls on the planet to generate electricity for our needs for an entire year. It's just ironic that we're not doing more of that. And today in Canada, for example, a solar installation probably has a 12 to 15 year payback because we are spoiled with cheap energy. But in many other parts of the world, energy is not cheap like it is in North America, artificially cheap here. And they don't necessarily have the infrastructure to distribute centralized energy production, in parts of Africa, India, South America, Asia. People are needing to generate electricity because there is no grid, or the grid simply cannot expand to meet the demands. And their solar is hugely powerful. That energy is literally money. That money can be transferred digitally along with all of the data. And I think there is huge potential in that area, not only as a business case, but also as a mechanism to literally provide a future for the planet and for everybody that lives on it. Because at the end of the day, when you go out in space, you'll be hard pressed to show me the line where one country ends and another begins.
Thank you so much for listening. I am your host, Kasper Eike, and music was made by Øystein Skullestad. If you're feeling eager to learn more about Iota and the community, please have a look at iota.org and the other links in the description. And if someone also got inspired to start building and creating with the Iota protocol themselves, or to get involved with the community, I asked Harm for a bit of advice on how to get started. Have a listen and see you next time.
My advice, if you want to use Iota, start small. So download Node.js, run JavaScript on your computer locally, see how you can interact with Detangle, start building it from scratch and really small. And once you have something working and you see the potential of how that could be used, for example, in your device, then deploy it in your device. So really, first experience how Iota works and what you need to do to make it work. That would be my advice. So start small, scale it up later on. I would ask people who are listening to this and are eager to start developing something using hardware, just go for it. Just try and start building something. Maybe even apply for the EDF fund, Ecosystem Development Fund of Iota. The community is what drives this new future, and we need the community to really bring this further. So I hope the community listens and starts building today, actually.